What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to another video and to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how I changed the brake fluid in my BMW E90 320i using a motive power bleeder. The last couple months, I've been getting the service interval warning light on my dash for my brake fluid, so that's why I'm changing it. So changing your brake fluid using a motive power bleeder makes the process pretty easy and pretty doable yourself, so that you don't have to take it to a dealership or a shop and have to spend a few $100s for them to do it, when you can just spend about $80 for the power bleeder and a couple of catch cans and just do it yourself, and then be able to do it again in the future when the interval is up again. As usual, I'll leave a link down in the description of this video if you guys want to check it out for yourself and are thinking about trying this for yourself by the time you're done watching this video. I also want to mention that I'm not a certified mechanic or a professional in any way. I just simply like to do this stuff as a hobby in my free time. So as you can see, I was getting all four wheels ready to be removed for when I lift up the car using my handy quick jack, since I'm going to have to remove all four wheels so that I can get access to all four brake calibers. So the first thing I did here was fill up the motive power bleeder with about 1.5 liters of brake fluid. I just went ahead and used genuine BMW brake fluid. However, you do not have to use genuine BMW brake fluid. You can use the other brands that they sell at any auto store, just as long as it is .4 brake fluid. So the next thing I did here was open up the hood so that I can locate the brake fluid reservoir. It is located on the top right corner of the engine bay if you are looking at it from the front. It is underneath this little plastic covering piece. You just simply unclip the two sides and then remove that rubber piece there holding it down. Next, I went ahead and placed some towels around the brake fluid reservoir so I don't spill any brake fluid on the other components around it. And then I went ahead and just removed the cap to the brake fluid reservoir. Next, I went ahead and located the max and minimum points on the brake fluid reservoir, because next I used a turkey baster to remove brake fluid until it was at the minimum line. Make sure not to remove too much brake fluid so that it doesn't go below the minimum line, because then you risk getting air into the braking system. Once I reached the minimum point, I then refilled the brake fluid reservoir with brand new brake fluid up to the maximum point. Next, I went ahead and connected the motive power bleeder to the brake fluid reservoir. Now, this wasn't the first time I used the motive power bleeder. I used it on the F30 to change the brake fluid on that car first, just to make sure I did everything correctly and everything went well. But if you are using the power bleeder for the very first time, you're gonna have to connect the two hoses together at the point right there, and then go ahead and connect the end of it to the brake fluid reservoir. So the flushing of brake fluid through each caliber needs to be done in a specific order, starting with the farthest from the reservoir, ending with the closest to the reservoir. So starting with the rear passenger side, then going to the rear driver side, then going to the front passenger side, and then ending with the front driver side. So next I located the bleeder screw, which is underneath this little cap here, and then I went ahead and took my catch can and then took the hose that's connected to it and then connected it to the bleeder screw. So next I went back to the engine bay where the power bleeder is so that I can pump the power bleeder so that I can pressurize the system so that the brake fluid can be flushed through it. So for my BMW E90 and most newer BMWs, the pressure needs to be at about 10 to 15 psi. So I pumped the power bleeder to about 14 psi. Next, I used an adjustable wrench to match the size of the bleeder screw, And then I went ahead and turned the screw counterclockwise about a quarter turn until the brake fluid started flowing out through into the catch can. Next, I went ahead and let the brake fluid flow into the catch can for about 5 minutes until there were no bubbles visible inside the hose. By this point, the old brake fluid in this caliper would be flushed out. So after about, like I said, 5 minutes, I went ahead and closed the bleeder screw and then went ahead and removed the tubing to the catch can off of the bleeder screw and then kind of cleaned up a bit. So next I moved to the driver's side rear caliper and repeated the exact same process there. And then I went ahead and repeated the exact same process on the front passenger side caliper and then the front driver's side caliper. One important thing to note while doing this bleeding procedure on each of the 4 calibers is to periodically check the pressure on the power bleeder so that it doesn't drop below 10 psi. If you see it's dropping and getting close to 10 psi, go ahead and pump the power bleeder back up to about 14-15 psi. Another thing to note while doing the bleeding procedure is that you may run out of new brake fluid that is inside the power bleeder. If you see it is getting pretty low, go ahead and just close the bleeder screw and go ahead and refill the power bleeder with new brake fluid so that you don't run out. Simply just loosen the cap on the power bleeder slowly so that you release the pressure, and then once all the pressure is out, go ahead and just refill with new brake fluid. And then once you refilled it to a good amount, go ahead and put the cap back on and then pump the power bleeder back up to 14 psi, and then go ahead and resume the bleeding process on whichever caliber you are on. Another thing is that if your catch can becomes full with old brake fluid, you can go ahead and just close the bleeder screw and then dispose of the old brake fluid into a different container. And then now that your catch can is empty, go ahead and just resume the bleeding procedure on whichever caliber you were on. So once I finished bleeding all 4 brake calibers, I went ahead and released the pressure in the motive power bleeder so that I can remove the cap on top of the brake fluid reservoir. So once I removed the cap, I noticed that the reservoir was overfilled with brake fluid, so I went ahead and just used the turkey baster again and removed some of the brake fluid until it was at the max line again. So at this point, the brake fluid change is pretty much complete. The only thing left is just put the wheels back on. But I wanted to do like a little test to make sure the brake still functioned correctly and properly and everything. So I went ahead and just put the wheels back on here. And once I had the wheels all secured and bolted on and everything, I put some like bricks in front and in the back of the car so that when it's on the ground again, I went ahead and just put the car into gear or let it, like, you know, move back and forth while stepping on the brakes. In the case that the brakes didn't function normally, the brakes would stop the car from, you know, rolling anywhere. So that's what I did, just to make sure like everything worked correctly and functioned safely before I took the car out for a drive. So next I wanted to show you guys how to reset your service interval light on your instrument cluster here for the brake fluid. So the first thing I did here was put my key into the keyhole below the start button so that the car would turn on in the first mode. And then I went ahead and pressed the start button once so that the car would be in the second mode now, like the ignition mode where all of the lights turn on and everything, but the car isn't on yet, or the engine isn't on yet. So I did that, and then I let all of the warnings and lights come up, and then once they all went away, I went ahead and pressed the mileage button on the bottom left corner of the instrument cluster. I pressed that and I held it down until the service menu pops up on the middle screen in the instrument cluster here. Once the menu pops up, you can use this little knob here to scroll up and down the menu through all of these services. If you have a service due, that should be the first one that pops up on the menu. So since I had the brake fluid, that was the first one that popped up. So to reset the service interval, just press the BC button on the end of the turn signal knob there, as you just saw. So you press it once and it'll say reset, and then you press it again and hold it down, and then it'll automatically reset the service interval. So there you have it, you guys. That completes the process of changing the brake fluid on a BMW E90 using a motive power bleeder. The process is pretty much exactly the same on a BMW F30, since I know some of you follow me have an F30 also. I did the same exact process on my F30 and everything was great. So if you want to do this on your F30, you can follow these same exact steps. I will leave a link to the motive power bleeder and a couple of catch cans, the ones I got from FCP Euro, if you guys want to check those out. If you guys have any additional questions or comments or anything, feel free as always to comment down below the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe for more content like this. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next video.